Welcome to Living in the Word. I'm Marcus, and today I am being joined with Sky and Jantrell. We are going to be discussing cancel culture, how to let go of unforgiveness. So to start off, what is cancel culture?
So I actually looked this up because I was curious to see what it would say. So I guess like Wikipedia's definition is it's a cultural phenomenon in which some who are deemed to have acted or spoken in an unacceptable manner are ostracized, boycotted, or shunned. That's like the official dictionary definition. But to me, I think it's just like, it's a modern day Scarlet Letter. You know, like it's the idea that someone cannot like escape something that they've done. Like one specific deed defines them forever. Something bad that they did, essentially, is how I see it.
Yeah, I look at it the same way. It's, I look at it as it's just everybody turning against someone for whatever the reason, just because they don't agree with them. It's crazy because, everybody has their own opinion. We are supposed to respect everybody's own opinion. But now it's not saying that everything that person does is good or bad, but it's also just like why turn against someone or turn the entire world against somebody.
Yeah, I have I kind of looked it up too because I had my own opinion on it, but I wanted to see, try to get a broad spectrum of what it actually was. But a phrase that they used was call-out culture. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with it and more of a today term. Just because that's what it is, especially having social media and these big platforms where everybody just sits back and kind of puts on their judgment hat and looks at everybody else's lives instead of looking at their own, but being able to pick apart someone's life or life, and even they can have a whole movie and one little phrase in that movie just turns everything inside out. So yeah, I like that the call out culture. That was good.
So where did cancel culture come from, and how and why has it become the norm?
I think it's hard to say exactly where it originated, I think, but, this is the United States, right? Land of the free, First Amendment, free speech, blah, 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 right? So technically, you can't be, arrested or jailed or for something that you say in moderation, but for something that you say in general. That's kind of the basis of our freedom, right? So I think cancel culture started from the idea of the people want to make a citizen's arrest, if you will, on someone for something that they said or did, quote unquote. So, we the people are not going to let you get away with whatever thing that apparently is not acceptable, and we're going to put you in societal prison, if you will. I think that's kind of the idea of what it is and how it started. How it's become the norm, I just think is because of it's become more widespread. Like he was talking about social media. It's everywhere, right? You see it on Twitter, you see it on all of these different places, and it's almost inescapable to get away from. So I think just the widespread popularity of it and you seeing it everywhere that you go, essentially, is just it's normal. That guy got canceled, It is what it is.
Another one down.
Yeah.
And I look at it as cancel culture, for me, I think it's been around. We'll go back to Jesus. Because if you think about it, Jesus going around speaking about God, teaching, even the disciples going around, and what happened there? They were shunned. People would turn away from them. And they would try.
Stoned even.
They would stone. Yeah. And so they would try and get everybody to be like, no, don't listen to this person. It's blasphemy, whatever. So I think it's always been a thing, but it's become more normal now because of social media. and because we get the word out there, the word gets out there very quickly because of social media. Like, you do something today, either in 2 hours, if you have that platform, in about 2 hours somebody's gonna have a meme about it, or somebody that doesn't like you is gonna have something out there about it. And I think that's where it became the norm, and why it's so big.
So, you're just talking about Jesus and the movement that he had. And I think that's where it started, at least back then. Cancel culture was always about a group or an idea that was canceled. It was about, even with the slavery, somebody rose up, said something, then had the whole follower, and everybody came behind them and canceled that culture. So it was more of a group to group base, I feel like, back in the day, and now it's more individualized. We want to go after him or her specifically, and whatever they got going on, we want to cancel that. So I think that's what makes it more of a norm now, because it's individuals being attacked. Now we still got groups being attacked, with the LGBTQ communities and the Black Lives Matter movement. Those are big movements that people are trying to, or other groups, organizations are trying to cancel. But I feel like in this day and age, it's more individualized, or just it's more of an attack on an individual more than just groups.
Yeah, I agree. I also think in terms of it becoming normal, it always takes like somebody like semi-famous or like very popular to get something really like going into something. So I really think it became big when public figures started calling out other public figures for things. Because, like, I can't cancel somebody. I'm not important enough, right? Like, nobody cares. Like, my 200 followers on Twitter, like, that's not big enough to be like, we need to go cancel this big person, right? But when somebody with a huge platform comes out and says something, and they have millions of people who follow them, and then all those people retweet, blah, 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 now it's like a thing. So I think it's also the compliance, if you will, of like people who have a large platform engaging in it, and then everybody else like following and doing what they're doing.
Yeah. So we're having this talk now about it. Why is it important to talk about cancel culture?
I think it's important to understand what it is and how it's evolved through the time, and I guess what it's used for. Because, there is some good and bad, like with the whole child sexual harassment and sex trafficking. That's a movement. And, there's people rising up like Tim Tebow, and he's bringing up his platform to cancel that. Some people might not think it's a culture, but it kind of is with how big it is. And so that's, I think that we just have to understand the importance of it, and do our research on why you're canceling this culture, or why someone's like, what's the whole idea behind it? Like, what is the motivation to cancel such and such? So I think that's important, because we have to choose sides. The Bible, we choose to listen to Jesus and live by the word. So we all have to make a decision. So you got to understand it in order to make the right decision.
Yeah, I think, we just gotta, there's a lot of issues and topics that need to be talked about, and this is one of those ones that I feel if nobody's talking about it, there's not going to be a way that we're going to kind of get a handle on it, and not necessarily get rid of cancel culture, but at least, I guess in a way, kind of turn it. And instead of canceling individuals for what they've done, canceling, like I said, we're Christians. We're about the Bible. We're about God. Canceling those demonic forces, those demonic groups and stuff that are out there, and we're trying to make heaven on earth, basically. And so getting a handle on it, I feel, will help. If you talk about it more, you'll get a handle on it, and it'll help us get to that goal.
Yeah, it's important because we're Christians, right? And we have to evaluate what we allow ourselves to get swept up in, and not just, following everything that the world is doing, and kind of taking a step back and asking ourselves, like, should we be actually engaging in cancel culture? Like, am I actually supposed to be doing this, or am I just kind of unconsciously, like, doing what everybody else is doing? And so, like you just said, like, change has to start with somebody. Like, if everybody's all doing the same thing, then nothing's ever going to change, right? So, like, we have to take a step back and be like, okay, what should be our stance on this? And then how can we potentially take steps toward, like, changing the narrative and making a difference,
So you're talking about, getting swept up in it. I'm gonna jump around on y'all. We're gonna go so how do you avoid getting caught up in cancel culture on the, let's say, on the negative side of things? How do you avoid getting drugged into that, I guess, mob mentality of cancel culture?
I would say, you gotta get in word, and you gotta get in prayer, because he'll tell you, what you need to indulge in, or what you need to take a step back and, observe to make sure that you are saying the right things and doing the right things. So, I think it's important to pray about it before you make a decision to follow somebody else's movement or follow somebody else's culture or opinions. And I think that's a big thing that we get caught up in. You said somebody with a big platform is going to be the one to start something like that. So, if you find interest into this pop singer that is, top 100 charts, some people idolize them, and whatever they say goes. Mm-hmm. And, they follow a certain movement. Well, I am too, because he or she is my favorite pop singer, So yeah. I think it's important to stay in the Word, stay in prayer, and allow God to move in your life and tell you your next steps.
For me, I just think, hey, stop believing everything you see on the internet. Mm-hmm. That's a big thing too. Yeah. Like, there's so many people that just because it may come from a semi-credible source, it doesn't mean that it's true. Yeah. It's still people writing these narratives. And there are so many people out there that go with everything that they see. They believe every little thing that they see. Yeah. And it's just one of those things, like, you don't have to get off the internet. You don't have to get off of social media. But if you stop feeding into it, and if you stop believing everything, I'm all about researching for yourself. Matter of fact, Pastor and Pastor Janie love to say it all the time. Run it by the Word. And it's the same thing with what you hear out there. Do your research about whatever the issue is that they're trying to cancel, or the person. Do your own looking into it, and stop just jumping on the bandwagon. And I think another thing too is we also have to respect other people's opinion. We're not going to agree with everybody, and everybody's not going to agree with you. And that's just how the world is. That's how it should be. We shouldn't all agree on the same. We're not going to all. We're humans. We're not going to agree on the same thing. And I just feel, just let them talk, let them have their opinion, and move on about it. If you disagree, you don't have to go on there and say you disagree. You don't have to bash them. You don't have to tear them down. We're all going to have different opinions on everything.
Yeah, I think just being less reactive in general is, the internet trolls and the keyboard warriors, like they sit around and they wait for something, right? And then they're like, boom, and they just go. And if we're doing the same thing as them, then how are we any different, right? Like we have to be different in some way. So I think just being less reactive to something and just being more evaluative. Like stop before you get ready to send the tweet or whatever. Just pause and really think about it. Like you said, run it by the word, pray about it, pray for those people, because people are lost. Like it's just a fact. And so like I try to pray a lot for just, for God to open people's eyes, to give people awareness as to what's really going on, and really that it's the devil behind most of this stuff, right? Like we wrestle not against flesh and blood. It's not actually people, it's the things behind the people.
Yeah.
And so I think when you recognize that, then you begin to have a little bit more compassion for people, and you pray for them, and you move differently than the world moves, and you don't just do everything the way that the world is doing it, to me. So
That's good.
Yeah. So, how does unforgiveness play a part in cancel culture?
I mean, the very foundation of cancel culture is, you're saying that someone is essentially unredeemable for something that they said or did, and factually it's unbiblical, because, right, like even for us, there's no condemnation in Christ Jesus, right? So if we're supposed to be a representation of Christ, then we can't go around condemning other people, even if what they're doing is wrong.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our job to go around and tell everybody everything that they're doing wrong, because God didn't do that with us, right? So we have to show people grace, and we have to show people love, or they're not going to know that that's what Christianity is. That's part of the entire misconception around Christianity, is that there's no love in it, and it's just a bunch of hypocrites walking around telling people what they can and can't do, and and unless we're doing something different, they're not going to know what Christ is actually about.
Yeah.
So I think we have to recognize, it's not about holding people to a standard that God is not holding us to. We've got to give people grace. We've got to show people love, and we've got to forgive people, even when they mess up, even when they actually did do something wrong, not to cancel them, but to give them forgiveness and grace.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds. I had that down too. Just the whole idea of cancel culture. It doesn't leave room for forgiveness at all.
Yeah.
It's you did this or you said this. That's it. That's the last straw. Like the world want nothing to do with you, and it's just regardless of what it is. I mean, you see Paul. He was killing Christians by the hundreds, by the thousands, and he was redeemed.
Yep.
And look what he did for the kingdom. So, I mean, some things are terrible, but it's not, like you said, it's not our place to judge. And it was heavy on me. I even tell this to my daughters, but before you point something out what somebody else is doing, the Bible says get the log out your own eye.
Yep.
And I kind of, when I see certain things in the world, or what certain person or group is doing, I kind of have to step back and realize, like, I've done some terrible things, and he's always forgiven me for it and given me grace and given me mercy and given me the strength to get past those bad things. So my job is to reciprocate that same love to the world, regardless of how nasty a situation may be.
Yeah. Why do we have a hard time forgiving people? And, the idea of cancel culture is not just it's a worldly thing. There's a lot of Christians that, are into it as well.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
as a Christian, like you said, we are to forgive. That's not saying we condone. That's not saying we agree. That's just saying that person is human, and God gave us the same grace. Like you said, what have you done? Just because you're not famous, that's the only reason why you haven't been canceled. Because I can guarantee there's a lot of things that we've all done that if we had that same platform, if we were famous, we would be canceled in a heartbeat. And so if you got to look at it from that standpoint of, you would want forgiveness for people. You would want people to not hold you to what you did maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Everybody grows. They're different. Yeah, we've all done things when we were young and dumb, but we've moved on from it. As Christians, we ask for forgiveness for it. God forgives us. God doesn't cancel us. Why are we canceling other people? Why can't we? Like I said, I'm not saying you're condoning it by giving them grace and mercy or forgiving them, but you're saying, I'm not your judge. I'm going to leave that in God's hands, but I'm going to forgive you, and I'm going to look past your mistakes because God looked past my mistakes. I asked for forgiveness. I repented, and he forgave me. Why am I not doing the same thing for you? And I think that once we can understand how to do that, cancel culture will be a thing in the past. I think it wouldn't even be as big as it is. And that's kind of where we need to get to, honestly. And if not, I feel if it keeps growing, if people keep feeding into it, it'll eventually destroy a lot of things. It'll, it's one of those. It's one of those we got to get rid of it or it'll get rid of us type of things. And I'd rather that not be the thing that does it. I'd rather we just go about respecting other people's opinions, understanding that we've all made mistakes, and understanding that it's okay to make mistakes. And as Christians, repenting for your sins and asking for forgiveness, and understanding that it's gonna happen. Nobody's perfect, and that's where a lot of the world has forgotten about celebrities in general. When we talk about cancel culture, is we hold them for some reason on a higher pedestal. We expect them to be perfect. We expect them to never make mistakes. But when we look at them as celebrities, we look at them as they should be perfect, but themselves, they look at themselves as us, as a normal person. Yes, they just have a very different job that everybody sees, but they're still one of us. Like, I ask it, you go to McDonald's, they mess up your order. Do you cancel them? Like, I mean, they messed up. They did you wrong. Are you gonna cancel them? No. So you got to look at it the same way with people or some organizations out there. Like, you can't just because you have the platform to do it. Why? Like, I feel with cancel culture, I feel it started getting bigger now because somebody was holding on to a grudge, and they had the platform and just put it out there. And so it's like I said, just forgive the person. Move on. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to support them. But you don't have to tear them down just because you felt that you were wronged. So.
And not just once, because, the devil's advocate kind of contrast to this is being like, okay, but what if they mess up twice? What if they mess up 3 times, right? And, in Matthew 18, Peter asked Jesus, like, how many times should I forgive somebody? Like 7 times? Like, what's the limit, right? And he said, no, it's 70 times 7. In other words, like, you shouldn't be keeping count of how many times you need to forgive somebody, because I'm not keeping count of how many times I've had to forgive you, right? All of us, we've all sinned. We've all fallen short, right? And so, also, just God's love in general, in 1 Corinthians 13, it says it keeps no record of wrongs. So we shouldn't be holding a tally on people and saying, oh, that's such and such's 13th time, like, that's not showing God's love. And so the problem with us as Christians engaging in something like this is that practicing unforgiveness on a wide scale also allows it to like seep into our personal lives, right?
Yeah.
When I played basketball, my coach, would get on me for like doing things like sloppy, right? Because you're going to play how you practice, right? So when you get in the game, you're naturally just going to habitually do the things that you were doing in practice. And I think it's the same thing. If we're constantly practicing not forgiving people and canceling people, then people who are close to us or our friends or things like that, all of a sudden I'm holding a grudge against people, or I'm giving somebody the silent treatment, or I'm trying to turn people against somebody, and I don't even recognize that I'm doing it, but that's because I'm practicing it, right? So I think it can also seep in and change our own lives if we allow it to. So we just have to be very mindful about everything that we're doing in showing love, in showing forgiveness, and doing it towards everybody, however many times it's required,
I think that's also another thing of why people get out of church. They get hurt in church, and then they cancel the church.
Yep.
And that's another...
Or the pastor,
we're
or whoever,
we're not talking about a famous person or a group. Well, we're talking about a group, but we're not talking about somebody famous. We're talking about, I went to this church, somebody said something to me, or I didn't like how I was called out, not necessarily directly, but they, people you feel like you're getting called out when somebody says something. But I feel, that's just God talking to you, let you know, hey, this is the area you need to work on. But it's the same thing. It's like you can cancel culture can be a personal thing too, and it's not necessarily towards, you're not putting anybody else against them, but you leave the church and you never go back, or you take years and years before you go back. And I think that's another big thing is you get hurt in church and you just cancel God basically. And that's another thing. I mean, that's also another topic, but that's another thing that, cancel culture has affected is, like you said, you don't even know it, and it's come on you, and now one little thing, one small thing, and you're done with that, with whatever it is. And that's crazy.
Especially in the church. You see it so much now, especially with pastors. Like, you see this pastor did this, or stuff comes out in the news and stuff like that. And the Christian community is the one that's canceling them, right? Yeah. And it's just like, okay, pastors really, on a scale, are no better or worse than us. Like, with sin, it's all the same, right? They need Jesus just as much as we do, and they make mistakes just like we make mistakes. And so I think, especially when it comes to pastors, because, the Bible says, touch not my anointed, right? So we really should be careful about calling out pastors or churches or things like that, because just because they do something wrong doesn't mean they're not appointed, doesn't mean they're not still, in the position to be a pastor. And so I even think of it on an extreme level, like the story of David and Saul in the Bible. David got anointed to be king, right? While Saul is still king. Saul literally tries to kill him, right? But God told David not to mess with Saul, right? So when David goes and like cuts the edge of his, garment or something like that, immediately David was like, I know I messed up. Not because I did anything bad, but just because God told me not to in general. Like, so I shouldn't not only should I not kill him, but I shouldn't even cut him. I shouldn't even touch him, right? So like, I think it's the same thing for us when it comes to pastors and people who are in a position that God has put them in. It's not on us to pass our own judgment to them, right? God is the judge. We're not the judge. So we just need to be very careful about, even within the Christian community, even within the church, not taking things to that level just because somebody did something wrong. It may have been wrong, but again, we show people love and forgiveness because that's what Christ did with us.
Yeah.
And it's important too, not only, Christians being so hard on Christians, but those that's outside of that box look at that. And they're like, dang, they're doing that to their own kind.
People, yeah.
What you think they're going to do to me?
Right.
I'm not going to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just from the outside looking in. I'm looking at myself like, if I would have seen, a brother do another brother some type of dirty way, You know, like I'm not going to put myself in that position to be done wrong. So it's important for us to, you know, love thy neighbor as thyself. You know, that's what the Bible says. And you gotta be careful, not only with Christians against Christians, but I mean we're called to spread the love, to spread the gospel, and we're not gonna be able to bring in anybody.
Yeah.
We're not gonna be able to expand His kingdom unless we do that.
Yeah.
We have to meet others with love, regardless of the situation, regardless of their political side, regardless of you know, really anything. You have to meet them where they are, just like, you know, Christ met us where we were at, and allow God to change them from the inside out.
Yeah. We're called to expand the kingdom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Make disciples.
Yep.
But we can't do that if we're canceling everybody.
Yep.
How are we going to get people saved if we cancel them
Before
and
they even
push
get here? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Like we push. I hate saying it, but Christians are sometimes they can be some of the worst people you come across because some get so high and mighty and so, I guess,
self-righteous.
Yeah.
Yep.
That they feel that, oh, I got to judge, like, just because you did, oh, no, you're wrong. You're going to hell for this. You're going to hell for that. And, again, another form of canceling. And so it's just one of those, like, hey, get down off your high horse because you're not God. You're not Jesus. You are, I'm not saying at the bottom, but you're below them. Let them handle what's happening. Let them be the judge of what's gonna happen to that person. But great conversation. Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
We're gonna do this again. We got more topics that we can branch off of this one.
Yep.
You know, you mentioned misconceptions of Christianity.
Yes.
That's in
the queue.
That's in there. That's gonna happen. But that's a big one.
Yep.
But again, thank you for joining us on Living in the Word. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.